Welcome, I'm Catherine Hadro, and this is EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Abortion and Holy Communion. The U.S. bishops will meet for their spring meeting this month, but will they debate the topic of Eucharistic coherence? There are U.S. bishops who want to delay those talks, but Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone is calling for more discussion. He joins us here. Budget battle. President Joe Biden rolls out his budget proposal for next year, but fails to include the pro-life Hyde amendment, allowing for the taxpayer funding of abortion. We explain what you need to know and how this breaks from recent presidential tradition.
Our ultimate goal, of course, is for a healthy mom and a healthy baby.
Helping women in need. The program in southern Missouri is helping homeless pregnant women get back on their feet after experiencing hardships in their life. We hear from the program director, who tells us there's no better reward than seeing mothers walk out the door with all the skills and tools they need to thrive. Open debate among U.S. Catholic bishops over whether or not to issue a statement on Eucharistic coherence continues to escalate. As first reported by The Pillar, more than 60 U.S. bishops recently signed a letter to the president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Jose Gomez, urging him to not move forward with plans for a discussion on Eucharistic coherence at the bishops' June meeting. The topic has especially been gaining traction following the inauguration of President Joe Biden and the question on whether prominent Catholics who oppose the church's teachings on life, like Biden, should be able to receive Holy Communion. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone responded to the attempts by other bishops to delay the Eucharistic document, writing, "I'm deeply grieved by the rising public acrimony among bishops and the adoption of behind-closed-doors maneuvers to interfere with the accepted, normal, agreed-upon procedures of the USCCB. Those who do not want to issue a document on Eucharistic coherence should be open to debating the question objectively and fairly with their brother bishops, rather than attempting to derail the process." Joining us now on Skype is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Welcome back, Your Excellency. You have been very vocal on this topic of Eucharistic coherence. First, can you explain what that means and why you've really been at the forefront calling for this?
Yes, Eucharistic coherence. The term actually comes from the Aparecida document of the Latin American Bishops' Conference. That was main author being the Archbishop of Buenos Aires at the time, Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, now Pope Francis. Coherence means there's a consistency between when we receive the Holy Eucharist and the way that we live our life, that we need to be properly disposed to receive the Eucharist. It came about in that document precisely talking about very grave moral evils and the responsibility of Catholics in political life, that they need to be championing the cause of justice and not evils, in order to have this coherence between what the act of receiving communion means and the way that they live their lives in conformity with that.
We are approaching the feast of Corpus Christi. This topic of Eucharistic coherence goes beyond pro-abortion politicians, doesn't it? Can you speak to the need for all Catholics to be better catechized on the Eucharist?
It certainly does. It goes way beyond that. And this is something the bishops have realized for a very long time. We've been debating this and discussing it for a very long time, at least 20 years now. And I remember as a new bishop, this issue coming up and the realization that the problem is our people don't understand what the act of receiving communion really means, in that sense of worthiness to receive Holy Communion. So certainly Eucharistic coherence applies to every single Catholic. Catholics prominent in public life, have an additional responsibility in terms of the public witness that they give, but it applies to all Catholics. So we do need to have a very major effort in recatechizing our people about this. And so it's providential that at the same time the bishops are working on the Eucharistic Revival Project. It's distinct from this Eucharistic coherence document, but it's also about trying to bring the Eucharist back to the center and core of Catholic life, and our understanding that Christ is truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, and then what it means to receive him in the Holy Eucharist, that we're living our lives in conformity with the beliefs that we profess.
Well, speaking of the U.S. bishops, the U.S. Bishop Spring Meeting is about 2 weeks away. At this moment, what are you expecting to happen on this topic? Are you hopeful there will be debate on Eucharistic coherence?
Yes, there will be a debate. The Archbishop Gomez is committed to following the procedures of the conference. The procedures are there to ensure that matters affecting the whole body of bishops are treated in a fair and objective way, that everyone has an opportunity to have a voice in it. The administrative committee meets in advance of each general meeting in order to set the agenda, and the administrative committee voted overwhelmingly to put this on the agenda. What is on the agenda is voting whether or not to issue this document. The bylaws of the conference require this, that if it's a document of the full body of bishops, the full body must approve the writing of such a document and issuing it. Then the respective committee, in this case is the doctrine committee, will actually write the document, and then when the document is prepared in November, we'll debate and vote on the document itself. So this will be on the agenda. We will be discussing it and debating it and voting to whether or not to issue this document. And that will happen. And I'm anticipating a vote to go forward with this. I sense among many bishops the even greater sense of urgency on this matter.
It's really clarifying. Your Excellency, President Biden is the second Catholic U.S. president, but the first Catholic president facing nationwide legalized abortion. If I'm understanding it correctly and everything you just explained, the current question facing U.S. bishops is whether or not to begin drafting a document about the topic of Eucharistic coherence. What's your response then to Catholics who say that's not enough, especially in the wake of this scandal and confusion by having a pro-abortion Catholic president?
A document in and of itself is not enough, that's correct. But precisely because of the confusion, we need a document will help to spell out the church teachings and positions on these issues, and it will be inclusive. It's not focusing only on abortion. It's not focusing only on politicians. It's any very serious evil. We are facing many of them nowadays, and the responsibility that all Catholics have. But documents such as this will lend greater clarity to the issue, to the church teaching, but it always depends on how the documents are implemented. And ultimately, it will be up to each individual bishop in his diocese to use this as a resource in teaching and acting in order to recatechize his people on the beauty of this Catholic truth.
The Vatican has also weighed in on this debate. The CDF is guiding U.S. bishops to have serene conversation on this topic and issued a call for unity. What do you make of this, and do you take that to mean U.S. bishops should not be publicly speaking out on this?
No, he did not say that at all. I don't know really why this letter from Cardinal Laudari was necessary, other than it was a response to a letter that Archbishop Gomez had written. So I suppose it's in light of that. But Cardinal Laudari gave some very reasonable advice to the bishops about we do need to have some serene conversations, dialogue about this. But again, we've been doing that for 20 years. He speaks about a second stage of dialogue of bishops with Catholic politicians. That has been going on, too, in the case of individual bishops and individual politicians. So we have been doing what he has asked us to do. He also recommended to us to use the letter that then Cardinal Ratzinger issued to the bishops back in 2004, giving some guidance on this very matter, and to use those principles in guiding our own document. In that letter, Cardinal Ratzinger cites specifically the issues of abortion and euthanasia as particularly grave evils that Catholics in public life cannot promote, and that these conversations have to take place, and if over time they prove to be useless, we cannot move the individual down the path of conversion, then the bishop must make a declaration that they're not to be admitted to Holy Communion. So it's basically what's already in canon law. Cardinal Ratzinger lays that out very clearly for us. Cardinal Laudari suggests that we use these principles in guiding our own documents. So we certainly have the support of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in light of what he put in the letter to go forward in this way with our document.
We have just under a minute left, Your Excellency, but I do want to ask you, the last time we spoke, our interview garnered over 1 million views and counting online, which to me indicates there are a lot of Catholics asking questions on this topic and interested in this. What do you want to say to our viewers on how they can be productive and fruitful and be engaged in this conversation that we're having?
Yes, well, you're following the conversations in the media. Please could be advocates for life. Let your bishops and your pastors, your parish priests know that you support them and how much you appreciate when they take stands on behalf of protecting human life in every stage and in every condition. We know we have your support, but to hear it voiced to us directly is a great help to us.
That's really helpful to hear. And thank you for your clarity and taking the time to join us again. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Thank you.
You're welcome.
President Joe Biden's proposed $6 trillion budget allows for the taxpayer funding of abortion, as he has excluded the longstanding pro-life Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment is a 45-year-old policy that bars federal funding of most elective abortions and Medicaid. It is estimated that Hyde has saved 2.5 million children from abortion since 1976. Abortion giant Planned Parenthood has been applauding Biden's budget for what they say are important funding increases in the U.S. and abroad. The U.S. Bishop's pro-life chair, Archbishop Joseph Naumann, responded to Biden's budget saying, quote, "There are aspects to President Biden's budget proposal that will assist vulnerable people. However, Congress must reject the administration's proposal to subsidize the deaths of unborn children. Taxpayer-funded abortion represents a failure to serve women in their maternity by funding despair and death instead of hope and life." Joining us now on Skype is Representative Kat Cammack of Florida. Congresswoman, welcome back to the show. You are one of the 20 of the new pro-life women elected to Congress this term. The last time we spoke, you said your #1 pro-life priority this term is to protect Hyde. What is your reaction then to President Biden's budget proposal that eliminated Hyde?
Well, it's great to be back, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me back on. And yes, our #1 priority right now is to protect the Hyde Amendment. And it's pretty shameful, especially from, a Catholic president, that, we aren't seeing any of the Hyde protections included in this over $6 trillion budget proposal. That's pretty shameful, and it should raise red flags in every pro-life community around the country. Ever since 1976, when it was enacted, this has been a critical protection for life and for the pro-life movement, where we don't use taxpayer dollars to fund organizations, be it through the nonprofit world or through the military, to fund abortions. So the fact that this is really the first time that we have not seen the Hyde Amendment included in a presidential budget speaks volumes of the priorities of this administration. And as I said, it's incumbent upon every single pro-life individual in the House, in the Senate, and really in government to speak up and speak out against this terrible, terrible budget that it will not only bankrupt us financially, but it's continuing to bankrupt our country morally. So I think we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are getting our voices heard, being loud, and ensuring that taxpayer dollars are not going to fund abortions.
And Congresswoman, banning the taxpayer funding of abortion should garner bipartisan support, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something that has just really baffled me that, if that is a choice that a woman wants to make, I would pray that she will always choose life. But if that's a decision that she wants to make, it shouldn't be taxpayer dollars that are going to fund this. And when you look at what's happening, the dynamics of this gridlock that we have in Congress, you're seeing different dynamics that we haven't really seen before. You have folks that aren't willing to sign their name to a discharge petition to allow a vote on whether or not we will protect infants that have survived abortion attempts. That's shameful. And that's pure politics through and through. And I think it says a lot about the state of affairs of where we're at in our nation when we can't even come together as Americans, as human beings, to talk about the fact that if a child survives an abortion attempt, that their life should be spared, that they should have medical attention, and that it should be reported. The fact that that's turned into a political issue where Democrats refuse to come to the table says a lot. And so again, I say that this budget that the president has put forward, not only is it bankrupting us economically and financially, but this is another step towards bankrupting our country morally. So again, for all of our watchers and listeners out there, please call your member of Congress and demand that Hyde protections be included in all of the appropriations and funding bills that we have coming forward.
It's really important to engage our viewers and encourage them to reach out to their members. But Congresswoman, given that gridlock, do you feel hopeful at all that pro-life members in Congress can push back against the pro-abortion majority and somehow find a way to include, ultimately, Hyde in the final budget?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we did the discharge petition a couple months ago, and we broke the record in the House of Representatives for the most signatures in one day, over 200 signatures on the Abortion Survivor Protection Act, that gave me hope that, one, Republicans and conservatives can come together to really do what needs to be done to protect life. But the conversations that I had with my Democrat colleagues that ensued, the ones that stopped me in the hallway or off the House floor and said, I'm with you 100%, but you know, I'm getting a lot of pressure from my leadership. If I sign on to this, they're going to strip me of my committees. If I do this, you know, I'm not going to be able to get reelected. Now, those same members who said those things to me and to some of my Republican colleagues, they're now announcing retirement. They're looking at other offices to run for, because I think they recognize that at some point you can't really stomach that type of position anymore when you're not willing to go to bat for infants who've survived abortion attempts and protect their life. Then what the heck are you doing as a representative of your constituents back home? So I think there's room. I think there is absolutely a movement afoot. This next generation that's coming up, this is the pro-life generation. And we're going to see tremendous progress made despite the blockades that are put in our way, despite the gridlock. We are making progress and we are fighting back. And we are that next generation that is going to move the needle on this issue.
Well, thank you for your pro-life leadership. Representative Kat Cammack of Florida, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
We are joined now by Autumn Christensen, the Federal Policy Director for the Susan B. Anthony List. Welcome back, Autumn.
Thank you.
Hyde has never been excluded in a final budget. Can you then put this into perspective for us and tell us the significance that Biden has removed it from his proposal?
Sure. So for 4 decades, we've agreed as a American public and as the Congress that we shouldn't fund abortion. We fund things that we want more of, that we think are good. We need more roads, so we fund more roads. But do we want to fund abortion? No, we don't. But now what this administration is saying is, actually, let's tell a woman facing a pregnancy that may be difficult that we think the best option for them is an abortion and we'll pay for it. And it's just unconscionable.
It is. And the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life protections have long had bipartisan support. What has happened that President Biden, who throughout his career in the Senate supported Hyde, is now the president to remove it?
It's a great question. You know, for many, many years, there were pro-life Democrats like Senator Biden at the time who supported the Hyde Amendment. But what happened was during this primary season in this last election cycle, it became very clear that if Biden wanted to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, that he had to make a deal with the abortion lobby and agree to back away from his support of the Hyde Amendment and to proactively support funding for brutal abortions through taxpayer dollars.
Wow, it's so disappointing. Another pro-life amendment that was also gutted in President Biden's budget proposal was the Dornan Amendment, which is known as the D.C. Hyde Amendment. What is this amendment exactly, and can you explain why it's important?
Sure. So, you know, the Hyde Amendment applies to the Medicaid program. It applies to a few other programs. But since the Hyde Amendment was first enacted, there has been an entire patchwork of Hyde-like amendments, amendments similar to the Hyde Amendment that prevent taxpayer funding for abortion in all sorts of different federal programs and programs over which the Congress has authority. And the District of Columbia is a place where the Congress is responsible for the budget. And so this longstanding policy has been, we will not fund abortions in the nation's capital. And now, of course, the President Biden has decided that he is going to eliminate that very important policy for the District of Columbia and invite taxpayer-funded abortions into the nation's capital.
Wow. You know, Congress has not yet approved this budget. Is it possible we can get the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life protections back into the budget?
So, you know, it's so important, and we at SBA List are already working so hard to protect the Hyde Amendment and the amendments that are similar to the Hyde Amendment that deserve protection. We're working very hard. We know that there is a slim Democratic majority in the House. Chances are that the House bills on this topic will continue that approach that the President has put forward of eliminating the Hyde Amendment, but we will be focusing very closely on the Senate, where you have that 50-50 Senate, and working with senators there, ensuring that they are willing to filibuster any bill that would fund abortion.
Okay, keeping that in mind, who are the key players in Congress that we really should be keeping our eye on if we want to follow this story?
Absolutely. So the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the House will be very key. Rosa DeLauro, a former chair of the Pro-Choice Caucus, so we know exactly where her agenda lies. We will be looking to see whether she goes even further than Biden in trying to eliminate pro-life policies, so that she will be a key player. And then in the Senate, Leader McConnell, and also, of course, Senator Manchin, who sits on that powerful Appropriations Committee and will have the opportunity to defend the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life policies in the Appropriations Committee in the Senate.
He's been a very powerful figure so far. And Autumn, just wrapping up this discussion, what does this timeline look like? How long do we expect this whole process and budget battle will take?
Sure, we sometimes call this appropriations season. So the budget kicks off the season, and as we go into June, we will see committee markups in the House, and then floor consideration in June and July. Then the Senate will kick off their process, and the deadline is the end of September. That's when they're supposed to be done. Now, typically, that process does get extended to the end of the year until December. So we will be working this issue until the very end.
Absolutely, and we're grateful for you and your insight guiding us along the way. Autumn Christensen with the Susan B. Anthony List, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
For over 4 decades, the Hyde Amendment has ensured Americans are not forced to pay for abortion on demand with their tax dollars. But President Biden did not include the Hyde Amendment in his budget proposal, and that means it's time for you to speak up for this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com to contact your U.S. representative right now and urge them to protect Hyde and other pro-life policies that save the lives of unborn children. President Biden's budget will first go to the House, which is why contacting members of Congress now is crucial. Let's urge our lawmakers to protect these long-standing pro-life amendments, because we do not want our tax dollars to go towards abortion. Go to prolifeweekly.com. Coming up, Rolling Stones magazine denies a scientific truth about unborn babies. I speak out when we return. Plus, a housing program for homeless pregnant women celebrates the arrival of more than 100 babies. We'll tell you what it's all about next. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Katherine Hadro. A Rolling Stone article falsely claims that unborn babies do not have a heart in early development. That is this week's Speak Out segment. Rolling Stone magazine published an article on Texas's new heartbeat law, which bans abortions when a heartbeat is detected as early as 6 weeks. But the Rolling Stone's reporter made a very false claim about an unborn baby's heartbeat. Listen to this. Rolling Stone reporter Peter Wade wrote, quote, "Although supporters of the bill are calling it a heartbeat law, there is no such thing as a fetal heartbeat at such an early stage in pregnancy, as the embryo does not yet have a heart. Instead, the embryo has a detectable electric signal coming from specialized cardiac cells." Pro-lifers were quick to criticize the article after abortion lobby NARAL tweeted it out. Dr. Gracie Christie of the Catholic Association responded, "We radiologists detect the fetal heartbeat as early as 3 weeks post-conception. We call that live gestation." The Susan B. Anthony list on Twitter responded with a link to scientific literature stating the initiation of the first heartbeat via the primitive heart tube begins at gestational day 22, followed by active fetal blood circulation by the end of week 4. A reporter's job is to share the truth, but this Rolling Stone article used euphemisms for an unborn baby's heartbeat. He denied scientific reality by saying a baby does not have a heart, but does have specialized cardiac cells. We hear the same lies when a pregnant woman is told she's not carrying a baby, she's just carrying a clump of cells. Open up any book on human embryology, and we know that babies develop hearts in the first trimester, early in development. Yeah, the hearts of developing babies are smaller than ours, just as a newborn baby's heart is smaller than ours. But it's still a heart, and it's the perfect size for that stage in life. I suggest that Rolling Stone magazine stick to music and leave the science to the scientists. For this week's Pro-Life Focus, we are spotlighting a maternity home for homeless and pregnant women in southern Missouri that is now celebrating the birth of more than 100 babies. LifeHouse Crisis Maternity Home has now helped to welcome 102 babies. They say their ultimate goal is to have both a healthy mom and a healthy baby. The center, which is part of Catholic Charities of Southern Missouri, helps pregnant women in need of a home. Staff members help women transition to residential housing, and mothers who have participated in the program also receive 2 years of continued case management and access to resources. LifeHouse tells us it's fulfilling and important work.
So the most rewarding is seeing that transition from walking through the door, having nothing, being totally afraid of what's going to happen and what's around the next corner, and seeing them make that transition into being a self-sufficient, actual part of the community again.
It's great to see Catholic Charities being such a model for us all, because that is a beautiful example of caring for both the mother and the baby. Thank you, LifeHouse Crisis Maternity Home, for your witness, and congratulations on those 102 babies you've helped to welcome so far. That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, we'd love to hear from you. Find us on social media at EWTN Pro-Life on all social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're there. You can also send us a message by emailing prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. We love to hear from you. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.